Hi, Mark from Toro Tamer here. Today we're going to make some wind-ons. Wind-on leaders are a real useful item. Used to be just the guys who were working with the heavy test lines made use of wind-ons. And a wind-on basically is some line where you've made a splice loop on one end. Here's our loop. And we'll use this to connect to the reel. The braid on that piece will terminate with a loop. And so now we'll have a loop-to-loop connection where we run the loop in, go around a couple of times, and then we have a cat's-paw connection that'll flow through basically any rod's guides. And it's a simpler system to use for changing out leaders quickly. You can make use of a standard inline rig with hollow braid, inserting the leader into, into your braid, which is on the reel, or for quick changeouts, you make use of the wind-on leaders, and that allows you to set up your rigs for use for different application, where you may want to run a heavier leader, say for bottom fishing versus fishing bait, for instance. Or the guys on the long range side go this route to reduce the knot diameter and the profile of the line. A bait may be able to drag a lure more effectively, or a bait more effectively. And we're seeing this used, not just the lunatic fringe such as myself, but other guys making use of these type of rigs dropping down 50-pound and below, because they are quick and easy to change out. And you can have different line tests covered if you need to drop down to 30-pound fluorocarbon, 40-pound, 50-pound, whatever, and have them all made up in advance. So you're not having to connect knots, not having to go through the downside issues of having knots in your rigs, flowing through the guides, that sort of thing. Also, it's kind of a trick to have a number of these made in advance of a trip during those days and weeks we can't go fishing. Have it all pre-rigged, ready to go. Once the opportunity is there to go fishing, you're in better shape to take advantage of the conditions. Okay, for a dual wall wind-on, start off with anywhere from 12 to 18 feet worth of your braid. Now, I'm going to use 130-pound for this example. When you have that length measured, grab it at the middle and make one leg about, let's say 8 inches or so shorter than the other. And starting with your shorter leg at the middle on the short leg, so let's say on a 12-foot section, that gives you 2 6-foot legs. One is going to be 6 feet 4 inches long. The other is going to be, 5 feet and 3/4. Bear with me for a moment. I'll turn off my phone. Now, so we're starting at about 8 inches off from the midpoint, and let's make a quick loop. I'm making use of a latch needle. Okay, I've just covered my loop. And now I'm going to bury the whole thing inside the braid here. And I'm going to go ahead and bunch this line up. And I'm going to go all the way outside, all the way through to the end of the braid. Okay. You may have to ease it off the needle. And then I come out, and here's my loop. Take the latch needle out. Again, you may have to help it a little bit where it gets bunched up. Don't unbunch it, just bring out your loop, okay? So here's my loop, okay? And now I've got this bunched up braid, and I've got the rest of my section. Now it's in through here that we'll load in the leader. And to make things easy, we'll go with some high vis, a little easier to see. Okay, so I've cut my leader off, which can be whatever material. This is some 100-pound high vis that'll be going inside of the 130 braid. And we take our hollow needle, insert the leader material into the hole. It looks like I may need to file down just a little bit. Okay. Now let's bring this leader into our braid. And generally, I'll tease the end a little bit just to get those fibers to open up. This is a 16-strand hollow core Toro Tamer braid. Funny how that works. I'm working with Toro Tamer and I'm showing off Toro Tamer braid. Pretty difficult to work with. Now I'm into my leader, and I'll continue pushing that needle all the way through here. Now I'm going to stress there are lots of different ways to make wind-ons. This is one way. For myself, I'll make them several different ways. On the heavy test, I may go more in this direction. But again, lots of different ways to do this. So now I've gone between the strands to bring my needle out. I'm going to hold the line, or the leader, back at the base, and done. Leader's inserted into the braid. I'll smooth things on down, make sure I've got a little leader to work with, and I really didn't give myself much, so let's go back in here. Okay, so I've got leader into braid, and I've got this double sheath here, the extra wall, and I'm going to go ahead and pull that down over the braid, just as you would if you were making a loop any other way. In this case, we made that loop super, this loop the same size, but we used a lot more braid, which is going to be folded down over itself and folded down over the braid that's now around our leader. That's giving us a double wall of braid. So you see, as I'm going in, I'm pulling this whole group down over the braid. So it's folding over itself. And you may have to kind of ease it along so you don't have any little clumps that build up that prevent this from flowing. Sometimes guys may wear a pair of gardening gloves or something. And if I've come close to measuring correctly, I've come pretty darn close. Okay. So we have our leader, And we've got our double sheath of the braid, as well as our loop. So our wind on is almost done. Last thing we have to do is serve the connection. Now, I've mentioned in other videos making use of nail knots or a Sato crimp. In this case, we're going to do a quick serve. Now, back over at the retail shop, we may have the ability of using a fancy $200 serving station. We don't have that luxury at home. This is a stand I made up with a 1x3, a couple of clamps, and then I use some smaller clamps to attach it to a table. I can use this most anywhere, including a boat. It's not maybe as good as the fancy commercial setups, but it's not doing a really hard job. All the darn thing has to do is hold your connection so you can serve it. Okay, serving table is set up. With our leader, I'm going to stick the leader in one side and my braid in the other. So, leader, line, braid, and my loop over here. And now we're going to make use of one of these little serving tools. This is one that gets a lot of miles with me. I also make use of the bear paw style, and these are good tools as well. A little heavier. There's nothing out there perfect. There's some things I like more about this tool. Ultimately, I wind up using this one more. It's a little simpler. I like the fact this is closed on the ring where the line comes out. All of them are made so you can tighten them up. In this case, I've got a wing nut. Here I've got a little knurled piece of machined metal. All of them good, and I wind up using a few different ones, and I'll have them spooled up with different thread. I've got some 20 and 30 pound of the multicolor that I use quite a bit. The 8 strand, this is 8 strand 30 on this one. I also do 8 strand 40 hollow for use on the heavy tough stuff. In this case, I've got this one marked for 30 pounds, so that's what I'll use is the 30. Typically, what I'll do is put a little bit of glue. At this point, let's see if I can move the camera over here a little bit, perhaps. Typically, I'll put a little bit of glue on the braid here, or I'll put down a nail knot, and then set that up. In this case, make sure this guy is feeding well, and it appears to be. Let's see here, just to be sure, I'm not going to dig in. This case, we're going to begin with a nail knot. There are many different ways of making these things up, as I keep on saying. I don't claim to be, the king of wind-ons. There are other guys that make their living doing this. I'm just a fisherman. We do have people, and there are people on our staff that make up the wind-ons for a living, as well as other things. That's not me. So somebody can do a better job, but I think this will work just fine. Let's see if we can get this camera angled right to show what I'm trying to do. First off, I want to put down a nail knot. One of the more useful knots you can learn to make yourself. Let's see here. And for this, I use a little tool I made up. This is part of an old rod that I notched. You can get commercial tools. This one's from Orvis for use for making nail knots, or you could use simply a nail or a soda straw. I'm going to give it 4 wraps, come back on through, rather underneath. I'll pop that off. And I'm just doing this to secure that point near the transition between the leader and the braid. I'll use a little loop puller. Very fancy piece of gear. It's been used quite a bit, as you can tell when I clean it off. It's just so I don't cut into myself with the braid, when I tighten this up. And I just want to tighten up, the braid on the nail to the point where uh, this line changes color. That means I've pulled it tightly enough that it's not going to undo itself. I see a little change in color. And I'll cut off one leg. This one, the tag end, snip that off. Okay, now we've got our serving thread, and we're ready to go on that part of it. So on the serve, what you want to do, you'll see these aren't equal sections between where that hole is. The instructions don't, I don't think, tell you, but have the hole closer to where you're going, and the longer part closer to where you've already been. I'm going to go back up my line a little bit, and then I'm going to turn tail and come back down the other way. I do something on my own that maybe the book says you're not supposed to. I go onto my mono about 1/4 inch. The reason for doing that is so I don't want any slipping at all, even on a cast, even under totally slack conditions. All this termination does is keep things from moving when your line is slack, okay? So now all we do is spin this puppy around. And I'll do this a bunch of times. I'm not going to waste your time watching, but it's going to get a number of wraps. I'm going to go up about 1 inch, and I'm going to go down about 1.5 inches, and I'll come back up and finish up with a nail knot. So all I'm going to do is swing this around and around, and perhaps if I zoom in enough, you'll be able to see that yes, it is in fact wrapping itself in a nice tight wind. Okay, the red shows up. I'll be back as soon as I get about 1 inch of this. I'll keep this process going. Now you can spin it like I've just been demonstrating here. That certainly can work. Important to me to make sure I've got a good tight wrap, and so setting that little nut or wing nut as well as doing it by hand with finger pressure, I think works best. Although you can swing the thing like I just demonstrated, and that can work just fine. What I want to make sure is that I'm not introducing a big twist or kink in the line itself. That would probably take away some test. You want this to be tight. Now, I should show. I want to shift directions now. I've gone about 1 inch, a little over 1 inch up here. And I want to turn back around and double back down onto my leader, then back up. Again, this is the way I do it. Different folks will approach things differently, and that's cool. So to change directions, I'm going to turn this puppy over. Make sure it's feeding the direction I want it to. So I'll do a few little wraps slowly and put a little downward pressure to make sure I'm getting the winds in the direction I want. And it's doing that. And so now I'm just going to keep on spinning this sucker around and around. So again, I'm going to back off the pressure. You'll find yourself increasing, decreasing to keep this consistent as you go. I'll check back with you as I get ready as I need to on this one. Now it's time to finish off, and to finish up, you're going to use 2 other little tools. First will be making use of a loop needle. Hopefully that's going to zoom in a little bit, maybe, and you can see the loop there on the end. And I'll grab a nail too from my kit. And what I want to do at this point, I'm going to loosen down a little bit and give myself some braid to play with. That's about enough. Okay, I'm going to finish off with a nail knot here. So I'm going to put my loop down. And again, see if we can get this to zero in a little bit. So I'll put my loop down. I'll make use of a nail too. And I'm going to give this 10 turns. 10 works, 5 works, 6 works. Doesn't much matter, but I go to 10 for my finishing nail. We're darn close to it. Give yourself, oh, I don't know, 6, 8 inches to play with. Go ahead and snip her off. Okay. And now, let's see if we can get this zeroed in a little bit better. Yeah. Now what I want to do is bring my braid through my loop of the needle. Wow, first time I got it. So I've got my 10 wraps, I've got my braid through the loop, and now I'll pull my loop through those 10 wraps there, and out the other side. And my nail's still there. I'll pull my nail out, and now I'll evenly tighten down those wraps that I made, hopefully. And I'll cinch that nail nut down. And she changed color, which is good. That's what I want to see. And I'll snip off my tag here. Okay, and we have our serve. Next step, I'll apply some glue to it. Let that set. And we've got a nice served connection. And that didn't take too much time. And this is the more complicated way to make a serve. It's because we use the double sheath on the braid instead of a single.